As churches entered 2020, they and their congregations had no knowledge of how quickly the world would transform. But as COVID swept across the globe with a racism crisis bubbling upward in its wake, churches across southern New England Conference began a rapid period of transformation to cope with the changing world. These churches were able to maintain their spiritual communities and pioneer new approaches to worship. Many of these churches began with updates to technology, which quickly became a cornerstone for worship services in the COVID era. Churches purchased cameras and recording equipment to make high-quality streaming and recordings available and replaced outdated paper hymnals with screens. So the question I have for you is, tell us about some of the audio-visual equipment you purchased.
So we operated fully virtual. So in order for us to leverage opportunities to record in the sanctuary, we needed to purchase and upgrade our microphones. We also needed to purchase a good quality video camera. That was critical. The microphones that we had were relatively outdated and quite frankly gave us some issues even in the congregation pre-pandemic, but they were not sharp enough to be able to pick up the sound quality in the way that we needed it to operate in order to participate on Zoom. We got a crash course in recording and the importance of a good video camera. And so that was really one of the major components. As we move into beginning to live stream, we needed to add an additional camera in order to have multiple directions or multiple views within the sanctuary. So that is coming soon. And we're looking forward to being able to train some additional folks to use that new equipment.
And as you made this transition, how did your congregation respond?
Well, I think the congregation was incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to actually see small groups of the choir or to see our pastor in the sanctuary. Prior to that, on Zoom, we simply relied on seeing each other in the squares. But after a period of time, we yearned to see our sanctuary. And so the cameras allowed us to record, to take advantage of the piano, the organ, and all of those things, as opposed to simply using recorded music from other sources. We were able to bring a little bit of our sanctuary into each of our homes.
That's great. That's great. Not all of the innovations of the COVID era were digital by nature. Many congregations discovered ways of reconnecting in person in new, socially distant ways. Tell us about your drive-by communion. What do you think this gave to church members that they couldn't get by just watching services at home?
Absolutely. Once we were able to do drive-through or walk-through, actually, I should call it communion, we had the option for individuals to pull up in front of the church where they would receive communion from their car, or you could park in the parking lot and come into the church through the front entrance, receive communion, and exit through the parking lot entrance. We had a pretty well-oiled process. It allowed folks at least to see each other's eyes. And many of us took a moment to just sit, socially distant, of course, in the sanctuary. But because we have a pastor who is a former healthcare provider and executive, there was not long that we could sit in those pews. She really kept us moving. But it still was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be able to walk through the building, to be in our community, to see that things were okay, and to be reminded of just how grateful we are for that sanctuary.
Can you tell us a story of an experience that someone had when they were able to go through that drive-through or walk-through, and from your perspective, what it really meant to them?
Sure. Well, this will be, I guess, a little bit more personal because I can reflect on the moment when we were able to, for the first time, come for walk-through communion. My oldest daughter is now away at college. And so her entire senior year, she was not able to be in the church building. And so this was the spring before she was to leave for college. It had been a full year. So we were so grateful to have had the opportunity to sit together, my mother, myself, and my two daughters in the sanctuary, just for a moment, so that she'd at least have a little piece of our church family and home to take with her. So many members had come through, were so happy to see her, so proud of her as she prepared to graduate from high school. And so that moment was particularly important, to have been able to come in, to take communion, to sit together, and be able to engage in a brief moment of prayer before we exited that door, just to shore her up a little bit before she left for school.
That's great. That's great. Yet through it all, our church leaders and congregations acquired new skills and understandings that will help them navigate an increasingly digital post-COVID era. Tell us about how your church has developed better technology skills and what this will mean for your future as a church.
So we absolutely had opportunities to become a bit more technologically savvy, even prior to the pandemic. But the pandemic forced us to have to, members of all ages, to become much more proficient. One of the things that I think we really have learned that will carry us through is the ability to pivot. Being that we're in New England, the simple fact of having a snow day on a Sunday, we no longer have to have. We can still come together as a congregation, even once we've come back in person, because we'll have the capability to be able to pivot, to join one another on Zoom in order to worship. I think that's really important. It also, I think, strengthened our faith in a way that reminded us that the building, while important, is not the church. That as we are taught, the church is all of us wherever we gather. And as we created our own communion tables in our own homes, in our kitchens, in our living rooms, in our dining rooms, wherever we were, we came together as God's church in every single facet of our community. And so I think it's those things, certainly our ability for some of our seniors to use Zoom. I think finally some folks have figured out how to mute and unmute, which is great. We encountered a Zoom bombing that was terrible at one point, and we saw just how fragile it could be when we had our link open to the public. And so we did have to help each other to learn to utilize a password, to learn to utilize the link that we send in an email, so that we could protect the sanctity of our worship service. So there's so many, I think, lessons that we've learned. Many of us chipped in to help, particularly some of our more seasoned members, as we made this transition. But we also still have opportunities as well, as we move into sort of a hybrid or a newly returned to in-person presence. And we'll be able to amplify our use of digital, use of video within the sanctuary, to produce copies of our services in different ways and have them ready real time for individuals to watch them on our Facebook page or on our website. So really excited about the possibilities that we have to be able to continue to minister, not just at 2030 Main Street in Hartford, but really all across the world.
What have you kept as an ongoing way of worshiping in this new hybrid model?
Well, we have not. We are still worshiping on Zoom fully.
Okay.
We expect to, in April, return to the building, and everyone is really excited about that. I suspect that the plan is to live stream. So we will still make it available for individuals who choose to remain at home, or, for example, our sick and shut-in who aren't able to get out to church at all. So we'll actually upgrade our capabilities, because right now we're meeting on Zoom, but we'll have the ability to live stream the service real time, so that folks who may not know how to join Zoom or aren't comfortable can actually watch it in other ways. right from their home. So I'm excited about that. There are many times where I've been traveling or things of that nature and haven't been able to attend church. Well, now we can be there. My daughter is, as I said, away at college. She has logged on most Sundays. And so now that's a possibility that's available to whether it's individuals who've moved away or our college students. So an important way to remain connected to those young people as they go off and do the things that they do. And also for those of us when we travel. We also have leveraged online giving, which we do provide a link during service for individuals who want to give via the web or give via text, which is what I do. I actually have it set up for recurring, but I particularly enjoy being able to give via text. So I think we've expanded our doors, if you will, in a way that we won't go back because we'll have what we're used to, but we'll continue to have what we expanded to be, which allows many, many more people the opportunity to be engaged.
Mm. What else have you experienced that you think might be helpful for folks?
Well, I know recently I saw that there is now a resource that is being referred to as tech deacons. So those of us who have responsibility for serving as host or co-host of the Zoom and will have expanded responsibilities when we return to the sanctuary in terms of live streaming, continuing to maintain the online presence, and really even amplifying our social media. Those are all ways, in fact, I think even new and exciting ways to bring others into the opportunity to serve where they may have had these skills and they weren't able to necessarily be utilized. So I'm really excited about that possibility to expand what we offer and also to invite others in to share. But what I was sharing was that I see that the conference has made available resources for tech deacons across the conference to be able to connect and share best practices and to be able to get information about how to do things differently to continue to improve the skill set of individuals who've stepped in to help in that way. So I'm excited about that as well because there's so much more that we may not even know that we can learn from other congregations across the conference.
What roadblocks have you encountered?
Well, one of the things, particularly about being on Zoom, is that, again, not everyone knows how to use it. There are those of us who work either for corporations or in roles that require us to be that adept at technology. And then there are many of us who don't. Not everyone has, a grandchild or a child in the house to help them. So, one of the things early on in the pandemic is we really tried to help some of our seniors to make sure they had the right equipment, right? Do you have a tablet? There's some folks that still dial in on the phone, right? So while you can access Zoom via telephone and you can't see, there are a number of our members who have operated over this whole period just listening, via a phone. So I think that's one of the roadblocks. The other thing is, we've attempted to amplify. When we initially began, we partnered with Emmanuel Congregational Church, and they were live streaming and on Facebook. And not all of our members have Facebook either. So, I think having multiple ways of accessing the service is going to be really important because we have to recognize that, everyone is not created, all things aren't created equal. And everyone doesn't have the same access to resources that they need. So I think that's one of the roadblocks is, assuming that everyone has the same capabilities. So we'll probably need to do some additional training, not just for the tech deacons, but for members of the congregation to help them better understand how to access, particularly as we move to live stream, and to be able to share with others how to access, even just to become more skilled and adept at using technology that will aid them, I think, as as time goes on. So I think, those are some of the roadblocks that it's hard when you say, well, we're on Zoom. So, if you can't figure it out, then, and I think, in some instances, we may have lost some folks who, you know, we'll see again when we return in person, but for whom, you know, that just wasn't for them.
Mm, mm,
So I think that's probably the biggest roadblock is how do we re-engage individuals who might have not been able to engage in a really tangible way. The other one particular constituent group that I would reference are our young people. So, you know, if they don't log on individually, and of course, during the pandemic, they spent their entire week on Google Meets or Zoom as well. So the last thing they wanted to do on Sunday morning was get on Zoom to watch
mhm.
church, is really to make sure that we connect with them. Particularly the children as well, who may not have their own devices. Parents were forcing kids to sit in screen with them, the younger kids, you know. And so that I think is going to be, my 6-year-old is dying to get back to church, misses the nursery, although I have to break it to her. She's too old for the nursery now. Now it's time to go to Sunday school. But I think, you know, that's a population, our young people, that we're going to have to do some real work to make sure that they get connected in the way that they were.
Mhm.
Um, so that would be one of the other roadblocks of, sure, you can sign on to Zoom, but is everyone in your family going to gather, you know,
Mhm.
to be able to do so? So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time with me today.
sure, I appreciate your flexibility.
Yeah.